Hi everybody, I'm Angelika Simpson from Stardust Express. I'm so happy and excited to be hosting this regular show on Tuesday evenings, where I will be sharing my knowledge and interest in alternative medicine, archaeology, my interest in where we as a species come from, for how long we might have been on this planet, and what is our real history. I'll be inviting some of the most inspiring people in my life. I will be sharing with you weird and wonderful information about our origin, about star constellations that influence us, to open your mind and your perception of our world. I intend to give you information that is not easy to get elsewhere, looking again at the things going on around us. A lot of interesting mix that will open your mind. My show is about truth issues, mysteries, new physics, consciousness, metaphysics, health, spirituality, science, music, sacred sites, psychology. Hello everybody, this is Angelika from Stardust Express. I welcome you to my show. Tonight I have got three what I think again are fascinating videos for you. And when we finished watching these videos, I will continue my vision work. And please, if you have got any questions and any comments to make concerning the vision work and any kind of progress you have made and you want us to let us know, please go on the chat and let me know about it. Okay, coming to my first video. It's from New Earth and it's about the Cathars. They are telling the truth as much as they have found out. And I don't know about you, but I have always been interested in the Cathars. I wanted to find out more about them, learn about them, and I find this video very, very mind-blowing. Enjoy.
Southern France is well known for its impressive Cathar castles. There are many of them, and their sheer size and also super strong walls are quite remarkable. But why are they in such a deplorable state now? Who and why would destroy such nice buildings instead of using them? And why were the Cathars mercilessly killed, hundreds of them even burned alive? A simple explanation for the annihilation of the Cathars is given in the history textbooks so that people don't ask too many questions. They were simply declared to be heretics, meaning people holding beliefs radically different from the rest of the society, and so it would look normal that they would be brutally killed. Many researchers, though, even mainstream researchers, Upon delving in the matter, they simply find out that Qatarism was not a heresy in any way. It was simply and solely a branch of the Orthodox Christian Church.
Regardless of exactly which church it was a branch of, the main point is that it wasn't any sort of heresy. And here's why. For example, Cathars had their own specific cross. As you can see, its points are somewhat thicker, and it's also placed inside a circle. Bearing that in mind, let's visit Notre Dame de Paris. Not only one of the main Christian temples of Paris itself, but also one of the most important in the whole of France. Cathar crosses are all over the cathedral. This one in particular is above the main entry, and this is the main scene depicting the Last Judgment. Clearly, the main figure is depicted with a Cathar cross on his head, a style of depiction which is standard for Orthodox icons. If indeed Catharism was a heresy, then why would they literally fill up their mainstream Christianity cathedral with heretic symbols? Moreover, mainstream historians themselves assure us that Notre Dame de Paris was born in the 13th century, and that is exactly the time when, supposedly, the Catholic Church, the popes, organized special crusades for a total annihilation of the Cathars. So we are to believe that while sending armies to erase them from the face of the earth, at the same time the Catholic Christians were adorning their most important cathedrals with Cathar crosses? The stories that the textbooks tell about the Cathars don't really jibe with reality. First of all, what was the real reason for killing them? They were not really heretics, as it has become obvious. So that was not the real reason. And second of all, when exactly did it happen?
Let's visit the museum Paul Dupuy in Toulouse. They have a collection of Cathar crosses over there, and interestingly enough, even the mainstream archaeologists over there have dated them at 14th and 15th century, as it is written on the tag next to them. But according to the artificially created non-realistic Scaligerian history, at that time the Cathars should have been already dead completely, all of them destroyed. How come their crosses are still around? Well, to avoid that uncomfortable moment, they have labeled them as steles discoidalis, or disc-shaped, stelos stones. It's true that these are stones shaped as discs, but why don't they just write the truth that these are Cathar crosses and nothing else? And absolutely the same crosses dating at absolutely same periods can be seen in the museums of Eastern Europe, where they show the Orthodox crosses of that time. And not only the crosses, most importantly, the the huge Cathar castles were thriving and flourishing and were mentioned very regularly all over the historic records of those reaching 16th and even 17th century. But the Cathars were supposedly dead already in 13th century. How come? It seems that the annihilation of the Cathars, along with many other events that were unpalatable for the history fabricators, to just get rid of them and not to attract unnecessary attention to them, they were just pushed back in time. Before reviewing why exactly were the Cathars uncomfortable, let's see what kind of explanation did the Scaligerian followers cook to explain the numerous references to the flourishing Cathar castles up to the 17th century. So the story they are telling us is as follows. Yes, the Qatar castles were destroyed in 13th century during the specially organized crusades against the Qatars, but we find later references to them because some local people, local noble people restored them after they got demolished and used them, and although it is written Qatar castles, there were no Qatars in them as such. And then the penguins continue, the modern followers of Scaliger. And now we see the castles laying in ruins again because they were destroyed for the second time in the 17th century when all these noble people became poor and could no longer afford to maintain them, and that's why they ordered their demolition. Really, all these independent noble people who got hold of them, none of them thought to keep them until they acquire money or leave them as a heritage for their children and grandchildren. And also, if they couldn't afford to pay their servants anymore, how did they find money to pay somebody to demolish these buildings, which by the way are very, very strong? The walls are over meter thick, and even special cement was used in these walls, much stronger than our modern cement. And some of these castles are rather huge. They're like entire small towns. Actually, the demolition of all these castles is such a hard work by itself that it is really a very interesting question. Why would one even do that for any reason? And actually, looking at the overall condition of the castles now and at their very thick and strong walls, the chances that all this got demolished manually would be less. Probably explosions would have been needed to bring down these mighty buildings. Mainstream historians assure us that there were no serious explosion military techniques familiar in Europe at that time, the 13th century. I'm not saying that's true, I'm just telling how their own stories don't match. If you feel that I'm exaggerating and that motivated armies or paid peasants would destroy anything manually, try demolishing over a meter thick wall made of strong beton with hammer. And I'm really talking from experience because the building, the house where I live, parts of it are some 500 years old. It wasn't even a fortification, just a normal house at that time, a bakery. The walls are, let's say, 1 meter thick. So a couple of years ago, we decided to change one of the windows because it was too small. We removed the old window and we had a big new window. We would have never thought that it would be a problem to remove, let's say, half of a square meter of wall. But it was impossible, although we had even these tools for breaking beton. They were barely making any scars to this. It's stones mixed with something harder than beton, actually. We worked a couple of days on it, and all we could do is remove just a couple of stones. The tools broke, but the stones were not moving. Eventually, we had to look to hire some sort of very specialized equipment, and because it was my bedroom, I slept in open air looking at the sky directly for a couple of months until we could complete this very simple project of removing a bit of the wall. And the men who saw this, all of them said, this mixture is harder than beton. And in the case of the Qatar castles, we are talking about destroying entire villages or small towns made of this material. And yet couple of the castles, the penguins assure us, okay, they did not get destroyed by their poor owners. They just fell apart by themselves. Now this is what is left of the Perpetuce castle. Barely anything is still standing, and this one, we are being assured, just fell apart by itself on its own. Nobody destroyed it. Just like that, within 200-300 years, fell apart on its own. I mean, most of the buildings are completely blown away and missing in this castle, and they are assuring it that it fell peacefully apart so quickly. And all these strange metamorphoses are happening only to Cathar castles in France. All the other castles, even if they are not so strong built, they stay much longer and they don't get destroyed and rebuilt regularly. But it just a chance, the Cathar castles, it just happens to them. And why do they publish all these ridiculous stories as history? Just to cover up that the Cathars were mercilessly murdered and exterminated somewhere in the 17th century, and their castles, which were the main trade points where all the riches of France were concentrated at that time, they were fully functional until the 17th century, and that's why they were regularly mentioned in all the documents of that time. And that was the first and only demolition of the castles. But what about the written records of the Cathars themselves? Maybe they will shed light on what actually happened and on who were the Cathars as such, because that we don't know as well. While all such records are conveniently missing, they were fed to the fires together with the Cathars themselves, and this particular image, the very top figure, even shows who was overseeing everything.
The Cathars were also known as Bogomil Cathars, because the type of Christianity that they were following came from somewhere in the East, and its proponent was Pop Bogomil. His name translated means priest, dear to God. Well, most probably they are a type of Christianity of which we know very little. Was much nearer to the original teachings of Christ, because wherever they went, they organized the social life of themselves and those who followed them. They were all equal, lived in harmony with nature. Taxes were very low or non-existent, and there were no violent conflicts between the various groups in the society. That seems fundamentally more Christian to me than the activities of the so-called real Christians that were burning and torturing and so on, which seems to me to be inspired by some other God, not the God of Jesus Christ, but the one with two horns on his head.
The original founders of the Cathar culture were also known as Vulgars, and in areas of Italy, France and Spain, where their culture was flourishing till date, the local people would be called Vulgars, Vulgars or Bulgars or something like that. Tribes, or let's say groups of people with similar names, can be found at various places in Asia and Balkans till now. Apparently these Vulgars, they went and spread and lived in different places. There is a Tibetan tribe called Bulgars. A full country is still named after them, Bulgaria. And the name itself, Vulgars, comes from the river Volga because they came from that region. But it wasn't just them. They mixed with the local population, and this symbiosis eventually formed the unique and probably very nice Qatar culture, because they were extremely peaceful people. They were famous for having still magical powers. They were vegetarians. Men and women had equal position in society, and most importantly, the local legends in various locations where the Qatars used to live, they all say that they used a lot of white magic in their daily lives. They preserved that knowledge, the legends say, from the really old times. And also because the picture that mainstream historians are drawing for us of the Qatars, the way they are presenting it is, frankly speaking, quite perverted.
For example, when they read these types of things in the mainstream history books, that the Cathars were against sex, presented in a very unattractive way, so that they kind of were against sex, or thought that it is something bad. Well, the reality of not only Cathars, I don't know about them in particular, but all these Gnostic religions are on purpose presented in the misleading light to us, so that we don't always understand them, and therefore we don't benefit from their wisdom. When an average person nowadays hears that a certain philosophy considers sex to be bad, one will feel a natural aversion to such a strange philosophy. Because for the common person on the street, sex is the most pure and beautiful experience that they can have in life at all. And hating it is very weird and unnatural. That's absolutely true. What is not true is that the Gnostics actually hated it. They simply had access to higher planes in which higher types of ecstasy could be experienced. And that is why those who would have achieved those higher levels already, after using genuine spiritual practices as taught by Jesus Christ originally, and now completely lost because of the church, one may eventually become less interested in sex. In the same way as when people grow up, they, in a natural way, lose interest towards children's toys. That in no way means that they will start hating the toys, or that they would never play with toys even as adults.
But because the parasites don't want the humans to have any access to the higher levels of consciousness and the higher levels of ecstasy, that's why they have compiled all these books of lies about Gnosticism. Or another example of how they are distorting our ideas, correct ideas about the world. Let's say somebody does something selflessly, helping the society and helping the other people around. And so we are told that such a person abandoned his own interest for the sake of the interest of others, and as if acted against his own good. But from a Gnostic point of view, it is a completely different picture, quite the opposite. By the power of genuine spiritual practices, one can reach such a level of understanding the nature of one's true self that one can directly perceive that all beings are connected in one huge, one single consciousness, and when he acts for the benefit of others, he sees clearly how this benefits him as well, because he is part of this one single organism. Person with such vision will never go to war or commit violence because he will feel as if he is hurting himself. And evil, which now rules the earth, doesn't want the people to have this vision because then it won't be able to trick them into believing and doing stupid things like this. People are told to commit crimes, for example, in the name of some higher, allegedly good cause, like your country or something like that. And people buy it. They get drafted and they go to war and they commit horrible crimes. They can be tricked in such a way because they don't have the higher vision, the magical vision of the Cathars. And so, special Albigensian crusade was organized by the popes in Rome, who of course could not tolerate the real teachings of Jesus Christ reaching the common people. But when the soldiers arrived on the spot to kill the Cathars, they found out that it was no longer possible to make a difference of who is the real Cathar that has arrived from abroad and who are the local people who have accepted their beliefs and lifestyle as well. There was no clear difference anymore, so they asked their leaders how to discriminate between real Cathars that have to be killed and locals who were Catholic themselves. The answer of their leader was very easy to understand. Just kill everybody in line and God in heaven will after that sort out who is good and who is not. It is a very disturbing fact that the philosophy of kill them all and let God sort them out is so widely spread in a society. I mean, Christian people who consider themselves Christian wear these t-shirts. They're very popular. Thousands of them have sold, probably still selling. This type of philosophy is fundamentally so much not a Christian and against the message of Jesus Christ. This is a public advertising, a call for indiscriminate genocide. And as far as the Cathars, they were murdered in such a merciless way, just to exterminate this old knowledge of the peaceful white magic which teaches man how to be the lord of one's environment. And that is why they worked so hard on destroying those huge, strong castles. They wouldn't risk any trace to be left of the Cathars, exactly like in the Bible. In the older times, when a certain deity with two horns on his head was instructing another tribe how to kill the people who had knowledge of the white magic, he was telling them, abandon the known rules of war. Don't even kidnap their wives. Don't even take their gold. Burn everything. For example, the tragedy which happened to the Tibetan people. Why did it happen to them? Because they were relatively good keepers of the old knowledge. Until the 20th century, they kept the old medicine, they kept the old magical practices. And what happened to them? They were tortured and put in concentration camps. And the full world just watched and did nothing. Where are all these preposterous screamers defending the so-called human rights? All that they're good for is to organize wars and get soldiers on the ground within a week based on theoretical and hypothetical assumption that something bad may happen if we don't go to this war. And when something very bad actually happens right in front of their eyes, they look the other way. Men who consider themselves Christians are part of military groups that have this as their emblem. These groups are financed by your money paid as taxes. Or maybe people should invest a bit more time in thinking before they vote. Or maybe we can find out more about the true philosophy of the Cathars from the information that has survived in the other places, for example, where Pope Bogumil himself lived. What a coincidence! What happened to the Bogumils over there as well is they were just murdered till the last one mercilessly. Why? They were leading very secluded life in the mountains, avoiding even meeting outsiders, what to speak of anything else, and yet for some strange coincidence they had to be killed till the last one, without any trace surviving about them or anything at all. It is also not by chance that this region of France is called Roussillon. It comes again from that word Rasseyanami, which means the scattered people, the way Mavro Urbini told us the survivors were called in old times. It cannot be a coincidence because the Cathars came from the Volga region, the original proponents of the teachings. They spoke this Slavic language in which the keepers of the old knowledge would identify themselves as Rasseyanami. Actually, Rasseyanami is the plural in this old Slavic language. The singular form is Rasseyan, which is even nearer to Roussillon, the French version. A monument has been erected nowadays in France commemorating the annihilation of the Cathars. And a very wise and appropriate quote by Francis Bacon is placed under this monument. It says, "Heretic is not the one who burns at the stake. He who lights the fire is the heretic." What Francis Bacon meant to say was that since heretic is somebody who is like strange, somebody who holds unusual or weird beliefs, so it is those who light up the fires to burn people alive, they are the strange ones. That's abnormal, that's not human. But as Anatoly Fomenko noted, there is yet another meaning to this wise quote. Heretic is by definition a person, proponent of provocative beliefs that are in strong opposition to the general established belief in the society at given time. And that's exactly what the actual Reformation did, not the one you hear about in school. The true Reformation was about forcing upon the society with military power the new, radically different and devilish way of life. According to somewhat reliable channeled material source, although they burned so many people who had magical knowledge alive in that time, they had to stop. They couldn't burn to their heart's content, so to say. And the reason was that since they were burning the actual saintly people, many of them would disappear and dissolve into air as they were being taken to the stake. And the problem with that was that the common people, when they saw these miracles, they started actually realizing that saints were being burned. Most of the information in this video is based on the New Chronology research, the New Chronology project of Anatoly Fomenko and Gleb Nusovsky. Pop Bogumil, the central figure of the Cathar movement, was born in Bulgaria, and that's also where he was killed, erased from the face of earth together with all his followers. And in that very same country, Bulgaria, again its name comes from Volgaria, the people from the Volga region. In that very same country, in recent times, one of the greatest modern prophets was born, the blind Saint Vanga. She departed from earth nearly some 2 decades ago. So in modern Bulgaria, many people have hard lives due to the excessive government corruption. And since Vanga was a very famous saint, they would go to her and ask, what have we done to deserve such unfair treatment, to deserve all this suffering? What kind of God has put us in such a situation that we are forced to live under constant oppression of this criminal government? The answer they received was quite unexpected. She said the nation had to pay for its sins because it's the Bulgarians, the other Bulgarians, who allowed Pop Bogumil to be murdered along with his followers in such a brutal way. That sounds quite abstract to most Bulgarians because what they know about Pop Bogumil is basically his name only. They are just a couple of lines in some remote page of the history textbook of their childhood. He is not treated as any major figure in our history, but now I understand that he actually was. And not just Bulgaria, but entire Europe as well, because the Bogumils, or Cathars, they were the last stronghold of the true teachings, the genuine philosophy of Jesus Christ. At least on such a scale. Even now there could be very small, isolated societies which still maintain the true teachings of Jesus Christ, but those, they will be always small. If they're too big, they would have been killed already. And despite the well-wishing philosophy of certain New Age groups who preach that don't pay attention to karma, you just, it will change as you go. Well, apparently it doesn't. There are cases clearly proving not only karma, but also ancestral karma. So what Vanga said about the payment of the sin of killing Pop Bogumil is fully plausible. And that is why I beg all of you to never vote again for politicians who finance military groups of the type kill them all and God will sort them out. In each and every country there is a political party, political movement who is against this type of activities. It's just a question of inquiring and finding out Who are they exactly? It is the bribed media who has convinced most people that all politicians must be corrupt and there is no other way. This is simply not true. Leaders of pure spirit and honor will be always there. That is for sure. But what is not sure is if the sheeple will care to recognize them, or they will decide to walk the path of negativity, always see themselves as innocent, helpless victims who will spend their lives in depressive state of consciousness, die in desperation just to get born again in the same circumstances again and again, until finally they don't get courageous and knowledgeable enough to start modeling their reality with the power of their thoughts and intentions.
I hope you liked this video. I find it very sad, the ending. My next video is from Zohar Stargate Ancient Discoveries, and their video is about the strangest ancient anomaly that has never been fully explained by any historian. I find this a very interesting video. Enjoy this one.
Hello, my name is Jim Vieira. I'd like to speak to a strange aspect of the giant phenomena, a very specific notation that is reported in the Bible and other esoteric documents of 6 fingers and 6 toes. Now, this is a rare genetic condition that exists in some humans, but it is portrayed as supernatural, divine, or malevolent in sources all around the planet. And I'm going to dig deep into this mystery, a mystery that you'll see that many academics have independently dove into and are basically asking questions about. I think it's a good example that this mystery is worthy of further investigation. Now, I'll let the audience make what they will of the evidence, but I feel personally this shows disconnected cultures talking about the same strange specific things that really make a compelling case that there's something to the story. So I have been studying this giant phenomenon for about 2 decades now and have pieced together my work in a book with my co-author Hugh Newman. I'm going to start today with a biblical quote, Samuel 21:20. "When there was yet a battle in Gath, there was a man of great stature that had on every hand 6 fingers and on every foot 6 toes, 24 in number, and he was also born to the giant." So it's specifically noted that this giant had 6 fingers and 6 toes. You also have at the Library of Ashburnabal in Iraq, modern day Iraq, these ancient texts that were portraying the story of human origins. And one of the tablets talks about polydactylism. In fact, the first mention of polydactyl in written form is found in Sumer Ibzu, an Assyrian compendium of 24 tablets with approximately 2,800 tetralogical omens. Most of the tablets were found in the Ashurnabal Library in Nineveh. And here I am at the British Museum with some of these cuneiform texts. Its third and fourth tablets contain a total of 15 omens pertaining to polydactyl, 6 fingers on one hand and 6 fingers on both hands, 6 toes on one foot and bilaterally, as well as 6 digits on both hands and feet. It basically tells you what each means. One is a positive omen, one is a negative if you have a child that's born with one or the other. So in the academic paper, Polydactyl and Development, Inheritance, and Evolution, the authors point out the following. Cuneiform texts on polydactyl votive child foot with 6 toes from Sumer, 26th century BC. And the inscription says, "What am I to do for my child with 6 toes?" Here is the votive with 6 toes, and here is the inscription that describes the condition and what the omen means. We also have this strange being in medieval times with 9 toes. So it's in the Arnstein Bible of a polydactylous man exhibiting 9 toes on each foot. Here is a newspaper clipping from the 60s, and you see just incredible amount of digits. A rare case of cross-polydactyl in humans combined preaxially and postaxially asymmetrical polydactyl with 6 complete fingers, as well as an extended thumb on the right hand, plus 7 complete fingers on the left hand, and 7 toes on each foot, total of 27 digits. And, you know, is this just a genetic fluke that keeps re-emerging in humans because it's associated, once again, with the divine and the supernatural? Or is it an inheritance from a parent race that is sometimes associated as giant or having multiple digits? That is sometimes the esoteric viewpoint. And the great sleeping prophet Edgar Cayce, actually, I went through all his readings, 25,000 readings, 14 million words cataloged at the Virginia Beach Library. And I found this account where Cayce describes Mu Zuin, who traveled to the Gobi Desert from the lost Pacific continent of Lemuria in 9026 BC as being 6 foot tall, blue-eyed, hair dark gold, hands 6-fingered. He's not portrayed as a giant, but in this area of the Gobi Desert, he is portrayed as having 6 fingers and blonde hair and blue eyes, which is unique to the area. And here's the Gobi Desert region. We also find Pliny the Elder mentioned the encounter between the Romans and the Seres at Taprobane, who were the Chinese. They exceeded the ordinary human height, had flaxen hair and blue eyes, and made an uncouth sort of noise by way of talking. So blonde hair and blue-eyed is not what we think of as Chinese people. And in fact, the Tarim Basin mummies were found several years ago, which were, I think, around 2,000 or 3,000 BC was when they were when these people lived, and they had red hair, blue eyes, and blonde hair. And their height was between 6 feet and 6 feet 6 inches tall. So Cayce has these ideas about Atlantis existing in the middle of the Atlantic, Lemuria being a lost continent in the Pacific. But when you go through his readings, there's always some corroborative evidence. You know, it seems totally off the wall when you hear his stuff. But then you have ideas and evidence like this that come forward that, like, maybe there were different peoples living in the region that tell a different story of our past. So 6 fingers and 6 toes is found at different sites in the American Southwest. This is Newspaper Rock at Utah, an ancient petroglyph site. And you find many hands and feet with 6 fingers and 6 toes here, including these 6-toed petroglyphs. This one's particularly interesting. Look at how big this one is, and it has 6 toes. So it's portrayed specifically and specifically noted in this ancient rock art. This is also a McCornell Ranch in Utah. Look at the giant feet and look at the hands, 6 toes on each. A recent National Geographic article was called "Extra Fingers and Toes Were Revered in Ancient Culture." The Pueblo people of Chaco Canyon decorated their great houses with 6-toed footprints and sandal-shaped art. Here's one of the kivas at Chaco Canyon. In fact, in room 30 at Pueblo Bonito, they found a skeleton of a foot that had 6 toes on it. And here on the wall at Pueblo Bonito, you find these 3 large footprints with 6 toes each. What you can't see over here is a normal size 5-toe footprint that is much smaller. So, initially intrigued by the divine powers attributed to the polydactyls among the Maya, researchers led by anthropologist Patricia Crown of the University of New Mexico conducted a comprehensive view of evidence for the condition of the canyon's sacred Pueblo Bonito site. They found this cast of a 6-toed individual, and basically the conclusion is that there was special burials and just a reverence for these people who had 6 fingers and 6 toes. And we find this in Colorado, in eastern Oklahoma. The 6-toed petroglyph is much larger than the others. This is recently sent to me by somebody who was hiking in a canyon in Utah. The 6-toed rock art is on the right. This is from an old geographical magazine, and it shows in Alton, Illinois, a rather large 6-toed petroglyph as compared to the 5-toed one. You find, basically all the southwestern states have this rock art where there's 6 toes and 6 fingers portrayed. Here again is another one with 7 and 7, and there are some of those as well. This is in Utah. This is in Moab. This is in New Mexico. Yes, Kitty. My son must have thrown that in there. This is in Texas, actually. And at this site, there is this giant 5-toed footprint. It doesn't have 6 toes, but on the Park Service website, it says this: a large foot, often with 6 toes, is a common symbol depicted in petroglyphs and pictographs. What do you think this foot could mean? So that's what it says. These professionals are asking this question. So why is it portrayed as particularly large? And then it seems to line up with the biblical passage about giants. This is from the Historical Collections of Georgia. It's from Doc Stevenson. And this is a series of rock art impressions he found. They comprise human feet from those 4 inches in length to those of great warriors, which measure 17.5 inches in length and 7 3/4 in breadth across the toes. What is a little curious, all the human feet are natural except this, which has 6 toes, proving him to have been a descendant of Titan. Another isolated example of a huge foot with 6 toes, and that's right in the middle at Track Rock Boulder right there. So in Morse's Geology in 1838, we have this account. In the state of Tennessee, 2 miles south of Brasstown on Enchanted Mountain, which is at the headwaters of the Tennessee River, are found impressed in the surface of the solid rock a great number of tracks. The human tracks are remarkable for uniformly having 6 toes each. One of these tracks is distinguished from the rest by its monstrousness, being of no less than 16 inches in length. Once again, unusually large footprint associated with this idea of 6 fingers and 6 toes. I've been looking for this site around Brasstown Bald and Enchanted Mountain. It hasn't been refound since 1838, but it's another site in these set of states around North Carolina, Tennessee, that have this representation of 6 fingers and toes. So Mooney was a researcher at the Smithsonian, and he recorded the Cherokee legend of Judaculla Rock. A legend describes the giant leaped down off his mountain to a creek below where he scratched the rock with his 7-fingered hands. And here is a representation of his seven-fingered hand right there. And the ancient belief of the Cherokee is that there was a giant who lived in the area with seven fingers. So at Camp Crittenden in Arizona, we have this account from 1891. While digging for a commercial building, a giant stone coffin was uncovered. The project manager didn't want to open it until an expert was called in to examine the strange find. When finally opened, a granite case was found inside, which appeared to have held a body of a man at least 12 feet tall. A carving on the casing pointed to the fact that he had 6 toes and fingers. In Baja California, at the Coso site, we also have 6 fingers and 6 toes represented, but in a particularly interesting way. There was an ancient native tradition that there was a race of giants with 6 fingers and 6 toes that the peoples of the time, the indigenous peoples, warred with. And you'll see right here, this Joker-like being has 6 toes on his right hand. But also we have this 6-toed being at war with these 5-toed beings. And right here, 6 fingers, and he is littered with arrows. And this one right here, you'll see 6 fingers, 6 fingers, and whoever this ancient person is, he is tuned up with a bunch of arrows, just trying to piece together if this ancient idea of a war between the two races occurred. So all around the world, you find the same phenomena. In a series of caves in China, we have the Buddha represented with 6 fingers on each of his hands. Now, once again, this idea of polydactylism is associated with malevolence and benevolence, with the divine and the supernatural. And the Buddha is represented with 6 fingers right here. And this is an interesting account from Madrid. There is one place in the world where the bulk of the population has 6 fingers on each hand, and some residents have 7. Very few have 5. The place is the tiny village of Cervera de Buitrago in an isolated section of the Madrid province. Citizens there are so accustomed to extra fingers that they regard a 5-fingered hand as normal. Now this, much like the Pueblo area in the southwest, there is a incidence of polydactylism that is much higher than the normal rate in the regular human population. The question is, was there an influx of ancient people to these areas and interbreeding that occurred that is displayed in the continued prevalence of polydactylism at this point? It seems to be the case. There's certainly a much higher prevalence in the American Southwest, and it's been noted in academic papers. Here you have a burial shroud from 100 AD, and the woman here has 6 toes on each foot, 12 in all. This is an ancient site of Ayin Ghazal, and what you're going to see is some of the oldest statues in the world are associated or they display polydactylism and androgyny, another strange topic that I'll get into at length in other talks. But right now I wanted to focus on this ancient settlement of Ayin Ghazal. So it first appeared in the MPPNB, which is the middle pre-pottery Neolithic B phase, and it's split into 2 phases. One starts in 10,300 before present and ends in 9950, while phase 2 ends in 9550 before present. So we have these super ancient statues at Ayin Ghazal, and I'll show you at Jericho as well, that have 6 fingers and or 6 toes. So in the Israeli Exploration Journal, the first Adam androgyny in the Ayin Ghazal bust, Ered Ziffer basically points to these statues as this parent race of humans. Now here is the foot with 6 toes from Ayin Ghazal, and this is what the sober academic says about these statues. It is proposed that the Ayin Ghazal statues represented deities. The polydactylism, a rare genetic syndrome, of the statues is viewed as a divine attribute, and based on cuneiform literature identifies the 2-headed busts as the likes of the gods Marduk and Ishtar. So Richard Barnett, his wife posthumously published his paper about polydactylism in the ancient world, and he explained at Ayin Ghazal, the statues are a mark of a supernatural entity such as the biblical Rephaim, the race of giants. So this is what Eretz Ziffer, the Israeli archaeologist, says. Drawing on Rolfson's interpretation, which understands the Ayin Ghazal statues as ancestral figures instrumental in shaping the historical identity of their makers, I would like to suggest that these statues represented mythical ancestors from the dawn of mankind, and that the two-headed busts among them represent the first human being, the androgynous prototype of humanity that had 6 fingers and 6 toes. So you have this idea being contemplated by academics. So here is the site of Jericho right here. And this is a pre-pottery Neolithic B site. So it's 10,700 to 8,000 years old. And once again, you have a 6-toed statue found at this site. And here's the ancient Tower of Jericho. And here it is right here, a representation of it. So you're finding that this polydactylism is represented in some of the oldest statues on the planet. At the Iron Age site of Tel Demii, it's at a Air Force base in Jordan. It's a protected site. And what they found here at this site was these 2 anthropomorphic statues that have 6, they're androgynous, and they have 6 fingers apiece. So another example of polydactylism in the ancient world. In Jordan, we also have a series of really superb dolmens that you find in the Caucasus and the British Isles and everywhere else. So it's attributed to these ancient builders, and were they associated with this lost race we're talking about, these supernatural beings. At Hamid Gadar in Israel, Jordan border, there's also this find from the Israeli Exploration Society journal. The enormous right foot and the left hand depicted on the marble slabs each have 6 digits. Then we go over to Paracas and Peru, where we have elongated skulls. But we also have this big pot that represents polydactylism in the hands. Each one clearly has 6 fingers, and the feet, strangely, just have 5 toes each. So this is another example in a different part of the world. And a new study out last year actually said the following, this prehistoric polydactylism, biological evidence and rock art representation from the Atacama Desert in northern Chile. So this study, and here's the authors, went in Chile and Argentina and found a vast amount of sites with 6 fingers and 6 toes carved everywhere. You'll see some of the examples right there. This is the region. See all the sites that are numbered had rock art with 6 fingers and 6 toes. Here's some more of the representations of what we're talking about. So, moreover, this is quoted from the academic paper. Moreover, the broad dispersion of hands and feet and rock art images with polydactyl in Chile and Argentina could suggest that it was more frequent than currently documented in the bioarchaeological record. Now, I don't know if that is true, or it's just the case that this attribute was so thought of as divine and supernatural that it was portrayed over and over again. But it's nice to see academics looking at this problem. Templo Mayor in Mexico City is an Aztec site. Here are the ruins of it right here. This is what it looked like in its heyday at Tenochtitlan. The entire area was surrounded by lakes Oaxaca. I'm sorry. The entire area was surrounded by a great lake, and this is what the reconstruction looked like at the time. So here you have the lake all around the old city, and this is what modern-day Mexico City, where it lies today. So right when you go in the temple, there are 2 murals of deities, and they both have 6 toes on each foot, oddly enough. So I took pictures of each of these, And I just found it really astonishing that right in the museum you have once again you have deities associated with this genetic condition, which is associated with giants. So there's another Aztec site right here with 6 fingers. And here is the Palenque ruins in Mexico. Here I am visiting a couple of years ago on a tour, and all around the site, this is from a Maya polydactylism academic paper, you find 6 fingers and 6 toes specifically noted. And you go over to Teotihuacan, and you find the same thing. In Mesoamerica, human representations with 6-digit hands and feet are identified in lithic sculptures from Palenque, clay model figures from Teotihuacan, and Zapoteca ceramics. So these beings or these entities are often displayed with 6 fingers and 6 toes. And here I am, I think with the same shirt, in an Olmec museum, and both those beings, these deities, have 6 fingers on their hands. You see right there. And oftentimes I'll travel to museums and I'll go, all around the world, and I'll find examples of this on Philistine coffins or in Sumerian places and different museums that have never been noted before. Like this androgynous being, this deity on the right from Ecuador, has 6 fingers clearly on the hands. Now this one has 5. This isn't like, oh, the artist screwed up. This is, like clearly being represented here. In Tulum, and there's a really beautiful place in Mexico, an ancient temple site, a Mayan temple site, you have the Temple of Frescoes. And in the backside of this temple, you have a 7-fingered painting. And this is an Etruscan fresco, and this deity, this is like a supernatural god who has to put on some pants, but it is noted in the academic journal that he has 6 fingers once again on each hand. And at the Getty Museum, you have this fertility goddess who, in this well-worn limestone representation of this ancient being, has 6 toes on each foot. Now, women would hold this fertility goddess and pray to this ancestral deity to have, a benevolent birth. And you got to ask, why is this being portrayed with 6 toes, this ancestor deity that is written about in academic papers and is super, super ancient? So the fertility goddess with 6 toes, implying superhuman qualities from southwestern Cyprus, goes back to a period of 3000 to 2500 BC. So these super ancient sites, these super ancient statues are all representing polydactylism. This is in Marlik, Iran. I believe it's 1900 BC, if I'm not mistaken, these ancient statues. Clearly 6 toes on every foot right here. And here's another one, 6 toes on every foot. And then you go over to Thailand, and at this rock shelter, this super ancient site, you find a hand that has 5 fingers right next to a 6-fingered hand, in an ancient cave site in Thailand on the other side of the world. Now, this idea of extra fingers and toes goes into mythology. Cuchulainn is a member of the Tuatha Dé Danann who showed up on the coast of Ireland. Some think, well, there are these stories that go back and talk about invasions before and after the Great Flood. And Cuchulainn was considered this divine, benevolent god, if you will. And he is specifically noted. I'll give this account here. Each foot had 7 toes and each hand 7 fingers, the nails with the grip of a hawk's claw or a griffin's clench. So this is from this particular mythological academic paper, but you can go to Wikipedia to find out about Cuchulainn having 7 fingers on each hand. And what's notable about him is he was called the foam of the sea and showed up in metal crafts along with the Tuatha Dé Danann, these mythical beings from a lost world who had advanced technology. And you go on the other side of the world to Lake Titicaca, where Viracocha emerged from the lake on a raft of serpents, the foam of the sea he was called, and he is portrayed with 6 fingers and 6 toes oftentimes as well. So you have these ancient beings from a lost world who show up, restart civilization, have supernatural abilities, and then there are specific notations about their abilities, their supernatural traits, and their polydactylism. This is from, it was found in 1938 by German archaeologists in Tibet. You see the backwards swastika, and the Buddha-like figure here has 6 fingers on his hands. And we don't know, he's got these space boots on, so we don't know if they're, on his feet as well. This statue was made from axatite, meteoric iron. And you'll see he is associated with 6 fingers once again. So this is another example from Iran of 6 fingers on each hand. I'm just showing these examples all around the world to really make this case that it's not just a coincidence. So from 1000 to 650 BC, we have that sculpture there. This is the Irish giant from Strand magazine in 1895. I can't attest to the, reality of this any more than anybody else because it doesn't exist anymore. But what I can tell you is this giant was on display. It was sent around to carnivals and people paid to see it at the time in the late 1800s. But it had 6 toes on its right foot and was 12 feet tall. There's an Egyptian coffin lid, clearly 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 fingers. Here in the Medical Journal of Malta, you have this account. Congenital malformations, a historical perspective. Polydactyl is evident in a handprint described from the Hal Saflieni Hypogeum in Malta. So you have these ancient ruins all around Malta, and there is a 6-fingered handprint also on a wall here at the Hypogeum. I spoke to the curator there, and they said they were aware that it's reported, but they've been unable to find where the handprint is now. So I'd like to go in there with some kind of, you got to get special permission, but some kind of technology to see if we can, refine this handprint. But once again, this land, this area that's associated with giants, Malta, just like Sicily and Sardinia, has 6 fingers and 6 toes associated with it. And also at the other temple of Hagar Kim, you have congenital malformations. You have a statuette that had 6 fingers associated with it. Here's a picture of the temple, super ancient temple. Before Göbekli Tepe was found in Malta, these were considered the world's oldest temples. And here are the statues I'm talking about. And we go over to Australia and we find, once again, these legends of giants, guardian spirits, androgynous beings. The ancient Australian Aborigines have an androgynous god as a creator god, just like the Zuni and native tribes do, or the beings Oannes and that show up in Sumerian, the other beings there, fish gods, they're considered androgynous. And even Viracocha in South America is known to be androgynous. Now, he is represented as male, but these beings are always portrayed as sexless beings who create humanity from the earth, in supernatural fashion. So, once again, this idea is shared all around the planet. So you have this 6-fingered guardian spirit right here, and this particular piece of rock art I've been unable to find, but I'll read it right here from 1959. For instance, a rock drawing found in New South Wales, Australia, shows a double-headed human male figure, 9 feet 6 inches long, with 6 fingers on the right hand. And I will say that just like the Ain Ghazal statues, there are a lot of academics who point to androgyny being portrayed as a 2-headed statue, as a male and a female. So you find this verified by academics, and it's all around the world, and this androgynous spirit being is 9'6" with 6 fingers on his right hand. And, for me, I just try to I find a real interest in piecing together all this ancient rock art, myths and legends, and esoteric teachings, and try to make a case that this seems well beyond coincidence. You could say, I don't know what the hell you could say about it, frankly. How you could really describe what is going on all around the planet with the myths and legends of giants, the association with polydactylism, and then the proof right in front over and over again. This isn't always just normal-sized beings. Often they're portrayed as giant. These cultures that had no connection with each other. So that's what kind of piques my interest in this matter. So here's another being. The one on the right, left has 5. This guy has 6 on each hand. This is a giant spirit being from Australia as well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 on each hand and 6 on each foot. That is pretty specific. You know, and our thoughts about Australia and the peopling of Australia are changing rapidly these days too. I'll read this account here that just came out. 2018, Aboriginal settlement in Australia was no accident. Aboriginal settlement in Australia was no accident twice. Purposeful voyaging on this scale relied on advanced cognitive, linguistic, symbolic, and technical capabilities. It would have required construction of watercraft and well-developed navigation technology, as well as planning and information sharing. Now, there was a multidisciplinary team of scientists that basically took on the study of how people populated ancient Australia. And oftentimes, to fit theories that don't work, scientists and academics come up with kind of ridiculous notions like, oh, these people must have been sent to this place after a flood. You know, there was a hurricane and they were on a raft of reeds, and that's how they got to this island, and things like that. Instead of maybe these ancient people had the ability to navigate. So you see a lot of confirmation bias in the alternative area and in modern day science, where I have this theory and let's, you know, ram the square peg in the round hole. But as many researchers have been suggesting, Australia looks like it was founded earlier by a much more sophisticated people. So here again we have 6 fingers on the hands of this being. I found this in the old literature from the 1800s. There were Aboriginals who came over to the mainland from an island they lived on, and they had these old drawings on bark. And one of the drawings was this strange being that has 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot. This divine and supernatural being, this isolated race before they died out, basically portrayed, you know, part of the mythology of the creation on this bark parchment, and it was recorded in old academic paper. So this is the kind of thing that, you know, you piece it all together and it's like, whoa, you know, and if you just read it individually, you say that's interesting. And what I'm trying to do once again is make this case and portray how ubiquitous this feature is. So at Matsing in Botswana, Africa, we have the emergence place of the great god that shows up, and he has 6 toes. The footprints of Lanao Laga Kwalbe is said to have belonged to an enormous man who, like Matsang is the original god, lived thousands of years ago. He was a 6-toed individual with massive feet. The footprint of one of these large feet was imprinted on a rock outside of Cadia. So here is the impression. The site was found in the 70s and is being preserved now in Botswana. But it's the place of emergence of the giant, and he has 6 toes once again. And here's another example of it. Here is Credo Mutwa. He is a Zulu shaman, and he has ideas about the past, you know, about extraterrestrial influences and things like that. He's a mystic and a shaman. And he says that 6 fingers and 6 toes are the mark of the supernatural Zulu god. He independently says this in his work, in his books. In Tanzania, you have this being with 2 hands, particularly large hands, that have 6 fingers on each. Now, this was brought to my attention by Michael Tellinger. I know Hugh Newman visited the site. There's this, what seems to be a giant footprint in South Africa. Now, I'm not claiming somebody stepped in the mud 200 million years ago, but maybe it is a representation by the indigenous peoples. Whatever it is, it's a giant footprint, and it actually has 6 toes. I think it's kind of quite striking to go along with the rest of the information I'm putting out there. So, you know, all around French Polynesia and the Pacific, you find the same phenomena. You find statues, these created gods, all throughout the Pacific Islands, just like this one here. So I think outside it's from the Austral Islands and outside a museum. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-fingered gods. Terry Dahl is an explorer, he's a Norwegian like Thor Heyerdahl. I think he lives in Australia now. And he was on our show, Search for the Lost Giants, and I'm friends with Terry. And he said what got him interested was in giants was he would travel to all these Pacific Islands. All these statues had 6 fingers and 6 toes. They were associated with giants. And all the local people told him the legends of the giants inhabiting these islands. Like in Kiribati, you have the footprints of Tarawa. And the anthropologist I.G. Turbot says the following: the short account is a factual report without any personal comments or interpretations of the position of the 2 series of footprints appearing on Tarawa Atoll in the Gilbert Islands, as shown to me and explained by the old men of Tarawa. Here's a picture of the site. Here is one of the giant footprints right there. You see 6 toes. There it is right there, a little tough to see. The book describes in detail the evidence for the prehistoric giants and the record of the gigantic footprints. Here, various footprints can clearly be seen in the volcanic stone, some of them so huge as to seem impossible. Most have 6 toes on each foot. And here's one of the elders stepping into the stone right here. It's a giant footprint. This particular footprint is said to be the left foot. It sinks a good inch into the solid rock. A coral limestone has 12 toes and measured 3'9" to 4'6" from toe to heel. Its counterpart, the right foot, is reported to be near the village of Tenk and Ranga on Maina, a separate island in the Gilberts, some 20 miles to the southwest of Tarawa. So you have another footprint, the match of this 12-toed giant. Make of it what you want. I think it's, once again, pretty interesting. So in Fiji, this is from an archaeological report, you have a handprint on the cave wall that has 6 fingers. And you go over to Easter Island. Now, Georgia Lee was an archaeologist who did her thesis by spending many years on Easter Island. And she seemed to be particularly interested. She wrote The Rock Art of Easter Island. She was particularly interested in the idea of 6 fingers and 6 toes. And here's one of the figures from Ranu Rakuru on the island, and she displays it there. But she also points out that the mysterious Birdman has 6 fingers here. And right here, the arrow, this is from the Peabody Museum. It was taken from Easter Island, and Georgia Lee, the archaeologist, points out it has 6 toes as well. And we all know about the famous statues, and what is lesser known is some really amazing megalithic work there that looks like it was of the same style and vintage as what you find in Peru. So in Ponape, you have more of these megalithic buildings. I point out these structures because there is a megalithic Pacific, basically. There are structures around the Pacific Islands that some researchers think are leftovers from a lost continent, from a Lemuria, if you will. And this is on Nan Madol. And here is Tonga right here. And here is the Trilithon of Tonga, just really astonishing megalithic feat. And these islands, these isolated islands, are littered with this kind of megalithic building. At the Altamira Cave in Spain, you have super ancient rock carvings. They could be up to 30,000 years old. And right here you have a spirit being with 7 fingers. And here you have a hybrid antelope gazelle human. Sometimes shamans will portray like this supernaturally, and he clearly has 6 fingers. And once again, you have this hybrid being. Sorry, I looked for the original in the Stockholm Museum. It's in the back room, so I have to go with this picture of it. But this, in the academic paper, it says this Greek figure, this hybrid figure, has a left hand, a huge left hand that has 6 fingers on it. And these winged siren hybrid beings are found from Anatolia to Greece in, I think, around 1500 to 2000 BC. They're cauldron holders, and they're often portrayed with 6 fingers on each hand. Now my friend J.J. Ainsworth sent me this. This is a hybrid scorpion being, I don't even know what it is, on a man bag, and you'll see it has 6 fingers right there. So you have this representation associated with hybrids, with supernaturals, with giants, with the lost race. In fact, I'm a believer in the collective unconscious, that we're sharing one mind, as much as we probably don't like it at some point. But these ideas keep getting dredged up and looked at and represented. And there was this idea of a parent race. In fact, Anne Rice, she wrote a series where there was a parent race with 6 fingers. And I know that's fiction, but these ideas, they seem to make sense that of all I've showed you, all the divine attributes, all the statues, the fertility goddesses and the giants and the places of emergence, it seems like there is a story here. And it's even shows up in art. 6 fingers here, 6 toes on St. John the Baptist in this painting. The first Adam in the Bible was actually androgynous. The second was human. And right here, Jan van Scherl, 1540, his painting. It's well noted this has 6 fingers. It's just a tough picture. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So androgynous beings are also associated with this. Like at the Temple of Esna, Khnum created humans on a potter's wheel, just like Viracocha of the earth, and Fu Shui and Nuwa in China, these androgynous creator gods. And this Temple of Esna is dedicated to an androgynous god. He is known to be this androgynous being, and he is portrayed as having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fingers. And on the other side of the ocean, we have our friend Viracocha, and here's Tiwanaku. Viracocha is right here. Now, he is well known to be androgynous. Google androgyny and Viracocha, you will find the old stories. He is thought to be a giant and a survivor of a lost civilization who emerges from Lake Titicaca. So there is a vase that Maurice Cottrell wrote about in The Lost Tomb of Viracocha, and it has a bas-relief with 6 fingers, and it looks like this one here. I can't find the original. Maurice hasn't sent to me yet, but I do know that Viracocha is represented in the German Museum, and he has 6 toes on his right foot, and he's basically portrayed as a hybrid being. So, what do you make of all this? What do I make of all this? I really feel like, if you're an academic, you can pick away at pieces of this, but it's tough to start talking about hybrids and gods and the supernatural and be taken seriously. So, I like to think of myself as a goodwill ambassador from the lunatic fringe, and I just try to piece together this information and tell a mythological tale about our past. And I think there's something to this. It is well beyond coincidence. That's what really gets me. I'm not, I don't have any skin in the game, like, I got to prove this case, or, I have to defend my position endlessly. I think any rational person strapped down to a chair and forced to listen to me talk about this for an hour will say, there's something to the story. I don't know truly what it is, but it seems like, there's something here. And like I said at the beginning, this resonates with some people, and some people just don't want any part to do with these controversial subjects. I'll just say, if you have an open-minded orientation around it, and you start looking and you start searching museums and ancient sites, you hear a different story. So I appreciate your time, and I'm glad to share this strange information with you.
My last video tonight is from Forbidden Knowledge. And it's very interesting. It's a mixture of biology and technology. The video has been done by Jan van Eycken, and he called this video Becoming. Enjoy it. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed these videos and got something out of it. If there are no more questions for our vision work, I would like to get started. Tonight I want to continue doing this work with the pencil. So if you have got yourself a nice pencil, please take your time and get it right now. If you haven't got something interesting and fun, you can take anything, any pen, any pencil, it doesn't matter. I give you just a moment to get yourself your toy so that we can start doing the exercises together. So I think by now you would have a pen, pencil or this kind of funny thing. Before we do anything, make sure that you are sitting comfortably on your chair. Take your glasses off, take your contact lenses off. If possible, if not, you have to leave them in, but it would be more, you would feel more comfortable if you could take them off. So I give you a moment just to do that. And now I want to get started. I have my pen, my pencil in my right hand. I cover with my left hand, I cover my left eye. I stretch my right arm and my right eye looks at the top of the pencil. If you haven't got something like that, look for any kind of marking on your pen or on your pencil, whatever you're holding, and be aware from that distance how clearly you can see it. Just take note of that. Then slowly move your arm forwards, move the pencil towards your eye until you reach a point where what you're looking at is really, really clear. Then move forward to the point where it starts to blur. Right up to your eye, touching your eye, quickly back. And again, we do this 3 times in total. So you stretch your arm and you're becoming aware of how clearly the thing is that you're looking at. Bring it closer to the point where it's really, really clear. Come closer to the point where it starts to blur. Right up to your eye, quickly back. And the last time, again, before you move your arm, have a look at the top of your pencil. How clearly, if there's any change already. It might be, might not be, just become aware. Bring it closer to the point where it's really clear. Closer to the point where it starts to blur. Right up to your eye, quickly back. Relax, change over to the other side, so your right hand covers your right eye. You stretch your left arm, and now your left eye looks at the pencil at the top of it. And you are becoming aware how clearly you see the thing. And you can compare now if your left eye sees the same thing than your right eye did, or if it is worse or better. Just become aware. Bring the pencil closer to the point where it's really, really clear. Now to the point where it starts to blur. Right up to your eye, quickly back. And again, have a look how your left eye is doing now when your hand is stretched out. How clearly the thing is you're looking at. Come closer to the point where it's really, really clear. To the point where it starts to blur. Right up to your eye, quickly back. Again, have one more look. if there has been a change in the meantime. And come closer to the point. It's really clear. Now closer to the point where it starts to blur again. Right up to your eye, quickly back and relax. Take your time for a moment because this is hard work for your eyes. It's sharpening the lens to give you better clarity in vision. So just be aware how your eyes feel. They might have woken up, they might feel worked, whatever it is you're feeling. Just become aware. And now take your pen or pencil up again, put it in front of you at a distance that is alright for you to look at. You don't have to see anything clearly. It just needs to feel okay to look at. So you hold your pencil in front of your nose. Your head is not moving from now on, only your eyes. So you move the pencil up as high as your eyes can reach, really high up, and feel the stretch. Your head is not moving, only your eyes. Hold it for a moment. Come back to the center. And now downwards. As far down as you can. You're not moving your head, only your eyes. Again, feel the stretch. You don't have to see anything clearly. It's not about that. Come back to the center. Now move the pencil to the right. As far right as you can, so that you can still see something. Even if it's not clear, it doesn't matter. Hold the stretch. Come back to the center. Change over to the other hand. Move to the left. Only your eyes are moving, not your head. As far as you can, so that you can still see something. Hold it and again feel the stretch. Come back to the center and now top left. As far as you can, hold it and feel the stretch in the diagonal now. Come back to the center. Bottom right. Again, feel the stretch in the downward position. Hold it for a moment. Come back to the center. Now top right. Again, hold it and feel the stretch. Come back to the center. Bottom left. Feel the diagonal stretch. Come back to the center. Change over to your right hand. And now again, your head is not moving, only your eyes. Now with your pen or pencil, do a clockwise circle. Do it slowly so that your eyes can follow the movement all around the circle. And stop when you reach the center again. And now anti-clockwise. Move slowly so that your eyes have time to follow. It's not so easy. And stop and relax. Check out how your eyes are feeling and the area all around your eyes. It might feel a bit achy. It might feel a bit really worked now. I will have a look. Somebody's in the chat. Yes, of course. It says that this person went to see my optician last Saturday and told him about the exercises. He seemed very strange about the exercises. Not really a question, just an observation that I found interesting. Thank you for this comment. And that's what you get, because they are not trained in alternative ways in improving eyesight. All they know, the opticians, is how to sell glasses, how to give people eye tests so that they, every time they come along, need stronger glasses. It's business. So of course they would tell you it's a waste of time to do these kind of exercises. But I find it sad, because these kind of eye exercises are around since 1920. So 100 years. And how backward and how conservative the optical industry still is in that regard. So coming back to our exercise today, don't worry if you feel a bit of achiness. It's just normal. What we have done is we have trained each muscle. When you look at the eyeball, it's held in place by 6 muscles to pull it in all kinds of direction, whatever we want to see, and wherever direction we want to see. So each of these movements, diagonal, up and down, left and right, has stretched each individual muscle. So you might feel like when you go into the gym and haven't done any exercises for a while, you feel achy. So don't worry if you feel the same now. And I want you to do, if possible, to do these exercises once a day. You will feel remarkable improvement in your overall movement of your eyes, in the overall level of less tiredness, being able to cope much better with our technological world of computers and screens all the time. You might feel it's a big improvement. And on top of it all, it slowly improves your eyesight. Doesn't matter if you're short-sighted or far-sighted. Anyway, so I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I see you all again next week. Goodbye. Oh, just before we stop. Question in the chat. You said this has been known since early 1900s. Can I refer my optician to some professor or something? Yes. Just mention Bates' method and they can check it up. It's everywhere. And this is the method that has been developed in 1920 by Dr. Bates, who was an ophthalmologist, a very good one, very special one. He has developed that. So refer to Bates' method. Okay, goodbye.
Humanity has been on an epic journey of discovery, learning the truth about the world we live in. New discoveries about the true origins of humanity, ancient history, free energy, as well as the systematic corruption of world governments are now on the forefront of our daily reality. Is the world headed towards destruction based on control and power? Or is an opportunity now being presented to shift and uplift into a higher consciousness? My name is Mel V, co-founder and creative director of Conscious Consumer Network, an independent broadcast network that was launched on the 1st of January 2015. Conscious Consumer Network provides full training and an interactive support network for all broadcasters, and we are always looking for inspiring and educational content.
Hi, this is Lainey Liberty.
And this is Miro Siegel.
Conscious Consumer Network has expanded to multiple broadcast locations, increasing our availability and reach across the world, remaining on the cutting edge of independent media. If we wish to create a better world, we must first create better media, geared towards real education instead of indoctrination.
You guys really are what changing the world is going to be about. It's educating kids at a grassroots level.
Dare to seek a better world. Support independent media.